I said coldly. Deduct Shen Yanzhou's entire performance bonus for this year. The moment those words left my mouth, the conference room fell into complete silence. 3 seconds passed. No one moved. The pen in the financial director Fang Jing's hand slipped from her fingers and hit the table with a sharp sound. She moved her lips as if she wanted to say something, but in the end, she swallowed her words. I leaned back in my chair, looking around at everyone in the room. The marketing director lowered his head, pretending to focus on his phone. The operations manager pretended to read through some documents. The HR manager simply stared blankly at the ceiling. Not a single person dared to respond. I raised my eyebrows slightly and asked coldly, "What? Does anyone have a problem with that?" Feng Jing tightened her grip on her pen, lowering her voice. CEO Gu Shen's performance rating has always been A+ this year. The North District project he led in the first half of the year exceeded expectations and generated an additional 1.3 million yuan in profit. According to company policy, I interrupted her. The policy was created by me. If I say deduct it, then it will be deducted. Fang Jing bit her lip and remained silent. The only sound left in the conference room was the low hum of the air conditioner. I stood up. The sound of my high heels hitting the floor echoed through the room with every step. When I reached the door, I turned around and glanced back. Everyone's expressions looked as if they had swallowed something bitter and wanted to spit it out, but didn't dare. The moment the conference room door closed behind me, the room immediately erupted. Oh my God, what is CEO Gu trying to do? Shen is her husband. She actually cut his entire annual bonus? Do you know how much money that is? At least $40,000. Isn't this basically hurting herself while hurting him too? I stood outside the door, listening to their carefully lowered voices. The coffee cup in my hand felt unbearably hot. $40,000? Shen Yanzhou, are you really worth that much? I walked back to my office in my high heels. Along the way, every employee lowered their head. No one dared to look me in the eyes. My assistant, Xiao Wen, was already waiting outside my office. She was holding a tablet in her arms, and her face looked slightly pale. CEO Gu Shen didn't come to work today. He's not answering his phone either. Don't worry about him. I opened the office door. He'll come back. Xiao Wen followed me inside. She placed the tablet on my desk and stood there hesitating for 5 seconds, as if she wanted to say something. But in the end, she turned around and left. I sat down in my chair and turned toward the floor-to-ceiling window. Outside, the city was covered in gray. The heavy smog blocked most of the sky. My phone screen lit up. It was a message from Lu Jingchuan. I heard about it. You deducted Shen Yanzhou's performance bonus? I replied with one word. Yes. Impressive. Lu Jingchuan sent a thumbs up emoji. But are you sure you want to do this? He is your husband after all. I stared at that message for a long time before turning my phone face down on the desk. Husband? Shen Yanzhou, do you still remember that you are my husband? 4 days earlier, I had just returned from a business trip to Sanya. The plane landed at 2 a.m. I dragged my heavy suitcase out of the airport and stood in the arrivals hall for 10 minutes, but no one came to pick me up. In the end, I had no choice but to take a taxi home. When I opened the door, the house was completely dark. A thin layer of dust covered the shoe cabinet. The kitchen sink was filled with dishes that had been sitting there for 3 days. The blanket on the bed was messily folded, and the pillow still carried traces of where he had slept. But Shen Yanzhou was nowhere to be found. I called him 3 times in a row. Every call was rejected. When I called twice more, his phone was already turned off. The next morning, I sat at the dining table, quietly drinking my coffee. Then Shen Yanzhou walked through the door. His shirt was wrinkled. His hair was messy. Dark circles hung beneath his eyes. When he saw me, his footsteps paused for a moment. You're back. Where were you? I held my coffee cup without looking at him. I was drinking with some friends. I had too much to drink, so I stayed at his place. Which friend? You don't know him. He took off his coat and casually threw it onto the sofa. A new friend. The coffee cup touched the table with a dull sound. Shen Yanzhou, I was away on a business trip for an entire week, and you didn't even come home? I did come home. Coming back just to sleep and leave again? You call that coming home? He turned around and looked at me quietly. His expression was strangely calm, and that calmness somehow made me uneasy. Gu Zhaoning, during the week you were away, how many times did you actually call me? I wanted to answer, but no words came out. 3 times. He answered for me. The first time was because you needed me to find a document. The second time was because you needed me to arrange a meeting with a client. The third time was when you called after drinking and spent 10 minutes blaming me, saying I wasn't thoughtful enough, saying I wasn't careful enough, saying I didn't care about you enough. He slowly rolled up his sleeve, revealing a faint scar on his wrist. Gu Zhaoning. While you were away, did you ever think about asking how I was doing? I stared at the scar on his wrist. Something inside my heart felt like it had been stabbed, but I didn't ask. I was Gu Zhaoning. 5 years ago, I built my company from nothing. After years of hard work, the company's annual revenue had exceeded 80 million yuan, and I was responsible for managing more than 100 employees. I had never been used to lowering my head. I had never been used to showing weakness. And I had never been willing to admit defeat in front of Shen Yanzhou. I picked up my coffee and took another sip. The coffee had already gone cold. Only bitterness remained. You're a grown man. Do you really need me to check on you and comfort you every single day? Shen Yanzhou looked at me silently for a long time. Then he gave a faint smile. It was such a weak and distant smile that if I wasn't paying close attention, I wouldn't even have noticed it. You're right. He turned around, walked into the bedroom, and closed the door. From that day on, we didn't say another word to each other. Until this morning, I saw him outside the company building. He got into a taxi, but the taxi wasn't heading toward the office. It was going toward the east side of the city. I told my driver to follow him. We followed him all the way to the high-speed railway station. He bought a ticket to Kunming. Kunming, the place we had once promised to visit together. The place we had talked about countless times, but never actually gone. I sat inside the car, watching his back disappear behind the ticket gates. My fingers gripped my phone tightly. My nails dug into my palm until the pain became numb. He bought a ticket to Kunming. He didn't tell me. He didn't ask for leave. He didn't even send me a single message. I returned to the company and immediately called a financial meeting. And that was how I ended up saying those words. Deduct Shen Yanzhou's entire performance bonus for this year. I leaned back in my chair and slowly closed my eyes. The image in my mind was still the same. Shen Yanzhou's back at the railway station. He was wearing a dark gray coat, the one I bought for him 3 years ago. He had worn it so many times that the cuffs were already slightly faded. When he passed through security, he never looked back. Not even once. 3 soft knocks sounded at the door. Xiaowen pushed it open. Her face looked even paler than before. CEO Gu, there is something I need to tell you. Go ahead. When you announced in the meeting that you were deducting Shen's entire annual bonus, I didn't get the chance to remind you. Xiaowen took a deep breath. Her voice trembled slightly. Shen resigned 4 months ago. I slowly opened my eyes. What did you say? 4 months ago. On June 15th, Shen submitted his resignation letter. Xiaowen spoke faster and faster, as if she was afraid she would lose the courage to continue if she stopped. At that time, you were on a business trip in Yunnan with Lu. I sent you an email, but you didn't reply. Then I sent you a WeChat message. You said you knew about it, so I assumed you had approved it. I stared at her. 4 months ago? Yes, June 15th. June 15th. I searched through my memories, and quickly, I found that date. June 15th was the day I flew to Kunming with Lu Jingchuan. That morning, Shen Yanzhou drove me to the airport. He helped me take my suitcase out of the trunk and softly said, "Take care of yourself." I simply replied, "I know." Then I boarded the plane, turned off my phone, and flew to Kunming with Lu Jingchuan. The original business trip was supposed to last only 3 days, but later Lu Jingchuan suggested visiting Dali, so we stayed another 4 days. A whole week. Shen Yanzhou submitted his resignation on the very first day of my trip, and I never responded. He waited silently for another 4 months. 4 months! A full 120 days. Every day, he still came to work as usual. He attended meetings on time. He handled projects efficiently. He continued solving all the problems I didn't want to deal with. Everyone believed he was still the company's vice president. Everyone believed he was still my husband. Only he knew the truth. He had already resigned. And after resigning, he still stayed by my side for another 4 months. I couldn't help wondering, what was he waiting for? Was he waiting for my approval? Was he hoping I would finally notice? Or was he waiting for me to change my mind? At that moment, Xiao Wen's soft voice reached my ears. CEO Gu, are you okay? I didn't answer. I slowly picked up my phone and opened Shen Yanzhou's WeChat. Our conversation history stopped at a message from 1 week ago. Are you coming home for dinner tonight? My reply was only 3 words. Not sure. I kept scrolling upward. Almost every conversation was the same. He asked if I was coming home for dinner. I said I wasn't sure. He asked when I would finish work. I said I didn't know. He asked if I was free on the weekend. I said we would talk later. Sometimes. He sent me photos. A flower blooming on the windowsill. A new dessert shop downstairs offering a buy one get one deal. The braised pork ribs he carefully cooked himself. But every time, my reply was always the same. I kept scrolling until I reached June 15th. That day, he sent me a message. Zhaoning, we need to talk. I didn't reply. The next day, he sent another message. When are you coming back? I answered with 1 word. Busy. From the 3rd day onward. The 4th message. The 5th message. In every message after that, he never sent another one. I closed WeChat and opened my contacts. I found Shen Yanzhou's number and pressed call. The phone rang 5 times. Then, he rejected the call. I refused to give up and called again. This time, it rang only 3 times before he rejected it again. The 3rd time I called, the phone was already turned off. I held my phone tightly. My fingers couldn't stop trembling. Outside the window, the smog became heavier. The entire city was covered in gray. The elevator doors slowly opened. The hallway lights were already on. I took out my keys and opened the door. Inside, the house was completely dark and silent. The shoe cabinet was empty. Shen Yanzhou's slippers were gone. I turned on the lights. The living room was clean and organized. On the coffee table was a half-finished glass of water. Underneath it was a note. I walked over and picked it up. The handwriting belonged to Shen Yanzhou. Zhaoning, I have left. Don't waste your time looking for me. The handwriting was neat and careful. Every stroke looked like it had been written after countless hesitations. I held the note tightly and sat on the sofa for a long time. The heating had been turned off. The March night was cold. I wrapped my coat around myself. My fingers touched my phone inside my pocket. I took it out. Then I called Lu Jingchuan. His voice came from the other end. Zhaoning, why are you still awake this late? Do you remember June 15th? We were in Kunming that day. Lu Jingchuan was silent for a few seconds. Then he answered, Of course I remember. That business trip was originally just me going alone. You insisted on coming with me because you said you wanted to see spring in Kunming. Was it really me who insisted on going? Yes, you kept saying you wanted to visit Kunming. It was the perfect opportunity, and I could show you around. His voice sounded casual. Why are you suddenly asking about this? I didn't answer. I simply hung up, because the truth was, I was the one who wanted to go. The day Shen Yanzhou submitted his resignation letter, I was walking through a flower market in Kunming with Lu Jingchuan. I bought a beautiful bouquet of roses. I took countless photos, and I posted them on my social media. Shen Yanzhou liked that post. But he didn't leave a single comment. I closed my eyes and buried my face in my hands. My phone lit up again. It was another message from Lu Jingchuan. Zhaoning, are you okay? I didn't reply. 5 minutes later, another message came. I heard Shen Yanzhou resigned. Do you need my help? I stared at those words. For some reason, an indescribable irritation rose inside me. I replied, Don't worry about it. Then I tossed my phone aside and walked into the bedroom. The wardrobe was open. Half of Shen Yanzhou's clothes were gone. Only a few summer t-shirts and a pair of faded jeans remained. On the bedside table was a ring. The ring he wore on our wedding day. The ring he had never taken off once. I picked it up and turned it over. Inside the ring were 2 engraved characters. Zhaoning. I clenched the ring tightly in my palm. The cold metal made my fingertips tremble. At the bottom of the wardrobe, a drawer was half open. I pulled it out and looked inside. There was a brown envelope sitting quietly inside. On it were 4 words. Resignation letter. I took out the document and slowly opened the first page. The date immediately caught my attention. 4 months ago, June 15th. On the final page, the approval section was still blank. My signature was missing. Underneath the resignation letter were several other documents. I pulled them out and looked carefully. They were medical examination reports. The name on them was Shen Yanzhou. The examination date was May 20th. I quickly flipped to the final page. My eyes stopped at the diagnosis section. It said, moderate depression. 3 months of rest recommended. The paper slipped from my hand. It fell to the floor with a soft sound. I bent down to pick it up. Only then did I realize my hands were shaking uncontrollably. Moderate depression, May 20th. So he had been diagnosed with depression back in May, and the doctor had told him to rest. But he didn't. He chose to keep working. He continued managing projects. He continued dealing with all the complicated matters for me. And then, on June 15th, the same day I flew to Kunming, he submitted his resignation. I never responded, and he forced himself to continue for another 4 months. 4 months, a full 120 days. A man suffering from moderate depression still showed up at the office every day. He smiled at everyone. He attended meetings. He prepared reports. He negotiated with clients. He handled complaints. No one knew what kind of pain he was carrying, not even me, his wife. I sat on the bedroom floor in silence. The documents were scattered around me. The ring was still tightly held in my hand. A cold breeze entered through the window. The curtains rose and moved with the wind, like a flag waving in the darkness. I suddenly remembered what happened at the railway station that morning. Shen Yanzhou was wearing that dark gray coat as he slowly walked through security. He turned his head slightly, just once. His eyes were not looking at the security checkpoint. They were looking toward the entrance of the station. What was he looking for? Was he waiting for me to appear? But my car was parked outside. He never saw me. Maybe he thought I wouldn't come. Maybe he thought I didn't care. He turned around, walked through the gate, and disappeared into the crowd. He never looked back again. I curled up on the bedroom floor. I buried my face between my knees. My shoulders trembled again and again, until eventually I became like a crushed piece of paper. After a long time, I slowly raised my head. I picked up my phone and opened Shen Yanzhou's chat window. I typed a long message, then deleted it. I typed again, then deleted it again. After countless attempts, I finally sent only 4 words. Where are you? The message was sent, but there was no response. Like a stone sinking into the ocean, I waited for an entire hour. Still nothing. Unable to hold myself back, I called him again. The only response was a cold, automated voice repeating the same sentence. Sorry, the number you are calling is currently switched off. I gripped my phone tightly. Slowly, I forced myself to stand up from the floor. My legs were numb and aching. I walked toward the window. I gently pushed it open. The freezing wind rushed inside immediately. It blew my hair wildly across my face. Down in the residential garden, rows of streetlights gave off a faint yellow glow. Under the endless darkness of the night, everything looked painfully lonely. I leaned against the window frame. My eyes fell on the empty road below. And suddenly, I remembered something Shen Yanzhou once said. It happened last winter. We were walking home together along this same road. Suddenly, he stopped beneath the streetlight. He looked down at the shadows of the two of us on the ground. Then he asked, Gu Zhaoning, do you know what I fear the most? What? He was silent for a moment. Then he said, I'm afraid that one day, on this road, there will only be me walking alone. I couldn't blame you, but I could never forgive myself. I regretted that. From the beginning to the end, I had never truly noticed you. Outside the window, the sky was slowly brightening. The haze had begun to thin, revealing a gray, overcast morning. Xiao Wen was still standing in the living room, too afraid to speak and too afraid to leave. I wiped the corner of my eyes and stood up. I picked up the divorce agreement from the coffee table and turned to the last page, staring at Shen Yanzhou's signature for a long time. Then, I placed the agreement back into the envelope and tucked it into my bag. Xiao Wen, book me a flight to Kunming. President Gu, you. The earliest flight. Xiao Wen glanced at her phone and hesitated for a moment. The earliest flight today is at 2 in the afternoon. It will arrive in Kunming at 6 in the evening. Book it. Xiao Wen nodded and turned to leave the living room. I stood there alone, looking at the gradually brightening sky outside the window, while a voice inside my heart kept asking me the same question. Shen Yanzhou, will you still be waiting for me? The potted plant on the windowsill was blooming. It was a jasmine plant, its white flowers delicate and pure. Before Shen Yanzhou left, he had watered it, and tiny droplets of water still clung to the petals, sparkling under the morning light. I walked over and gently touched one of the flowers with my fingertip. The water droplet rolled down and landed on the back of my hand, bringing with it a faint trace of coolness. The half-full glass of water on the coffee table was still sitting exactly where it had been. His fingerprints remained on the rim. I didn't wipe them away. A soft breeze drifted in through the window, making the curtains sway gently. The faint fragrance of jasmine lingered in the air, subtle yet unmistakable. On the sofa lay his dark gray trench coat, washed so many times that its color had faded. He had left without taking it with him. I picked it up carefully and turned the collar over. Inside, I saw a line of delicate embroidery. Zhao Ning, Year 5. He had specially asked a tailor to embroider those words last year. He told me he would add one line every year, and when we grew old, we would take it out together and look back on those years. But now, there was only the mark of the 5th year. There would be no 6th year, no 7th year, no 8th year, no years after that. I folded the coat carefully and placed it back on the sofa. Then I picked up my phone and sent Shen Yanzhou a WeChat message. "I'm coming to Kunming to see you." After sending it, I received no reply. I sent another message. "Wait for me." Still, there was no response. The phone screen went dark, only to be lit up again by me over and over. I repeated the same action until the battery ran out and the phone shut down automatically. Outside the window, rain began to fall softly. The raindrops tapped against the glass, creating a quiet, scattered rhythm. I stood by the window, staring at the blurred outline of the city hidden behind the curtain of rain. At that moment, there was only one thought in my mind. "Shen Yanzhou, you have to wait for me, even if this is the last time." The airport announcement echoed through the terminal, informing passengers that boarding for the flight to Kunming had begun. I pulled my suitcase behind me, walked through security, and hurried toward the boarding gate. My phone vibrated inside my pocket. I took it out and saw a WeChat message. It was from Shen Yanzhou. Only 3 words. "I'll wait here." My fingers tightened around the phone. My footsteps paused for a brief moment. Then, I quickened my pace and almost ran toward the boarding entrance. Through the airplane window, I looked outside. The clouds rolled beneath us like waves, while sunlight struggled to break through the gaps between them, pouring down golden rays that illuminated the sky. I leaned back against the seat and slowly closed my eyes. Shen Yanzhou's final words kept echoing in my mind. "I'll wait here. Wait for me to return to your side. Wait for me to stand before you and tell you everything I have kept buried in my heart. Wait for me to sincerely apologize and admit all the mistakes I have made. Wait for me to let you know that you were never someone who knew nothing. Wait for me to tell you that, in this world, no one deserves tenderness more than you." The plane began taxiing along the runway. The roar of the engines grew louder. The aircraft trembled slightly, and then, with a sudden lift, it broke through the clouds. "Kunming, I'm coming. Shen Yanzhou, you must wait for me." The clouds outside the window gradually grew thinner. Below us, endless mountains and lush green terraces slowly emerged into view. Kunming was getting closer. I gripped my phone tightly, my palm already covered in sweat. When the plane landed smoothly, I was the first passenger to stand up. I quickly grabbed my suitcase and hurried out of the cabin. Kunming Airport was spacious and bustling. I ran through the long corridors and arrived at the arrivals hall, my eyes desperately searching through the crowd. People came and went everywhere. Some were waiting to welcome their family members and friends. Some stood in line for taxis. Others dragged their suitcases along, rushing toward their next destination. But there was no sign of Shen Yanzhou. My heart tightened. I immediately took out my phone and dialed his number. The call rang 3 times before it was answered. "Have you arrived?" "I'm here." "Where are you right now?" "I'm right behind you." I froze. Then I turned around sharply. 10 meters away, Shen Yanzhou was standing there. He was wearing that same dark gray trench coat, holding a small bag in his hand. Printed on the bag were 3 words: "Flour cakes." He had lost a lot of weight. His cheekbones were more prominent, and his eyes looked deeper than before. But there was still a smile on his face. A smile so gentle, so quiet, as if he was afraid that even the slightest movement would disturb something precious. I stood there, staring at him, For a moment, I completely forgot how to speak. He was the one who broke the silence first. Gu Zhaoning. His voice was soft. You finally came. I came. He lifted the bag in his hand and gently shook it. These flour cakes were just bought. They're still warm. Looking at the bag in his hand, I suddenly remembered 4 months ago. Back then, at the flower market, he had been carrying a bag exactly like this. He had stood among the crowd, silently looking at me from a distance. At that time, he didn't dare to walk toward me. But now, he was the one who had taken the first step. I opened my mouth. My voice came out hoarse. Shen Yanzhou, I. Don't say anything yet. He handed the bag to me. Flour cakes don't taste good once they get cold. Have one first. I took the bag and opened it. Inside were 6 golden, crispy flour cakes, still warm, with steam rising faintly from them. I took a bite. The fragrance of roses slowly spread across my tongue. It was sweet, almost unbearably sweet, and suddenly, tears fell from my eyes. One drop after another landed on the flour cake, soaking through the delicate layers of pastry until they became soft and fragile. Shen Yanzhou looked at me quietly. He didn't say anything. He simply raised his hand and gently wiped away the crumbs at the corner of my mouth. Don't cry. His voice was tender. Is it because the cake doesn't taste good? It's delicious. My voice trembled with tears. It's really, really delicious. Then why are you crying? Because. I looked up at him. My tears blurred his face. Because 4 months ago, the bag of flour cakes you bought at the flower market, I swallowed hard. Was it also meant for me? He remained silent for a long time. Then he slowly nodded. Yes. Where is that bag of flour cakes now? I ate them. His voice was calm. I sat alone by Erhai Lake and ate all 6 of them. He paused briefly. When I reached the 4th one, it started raining. The remaining 2 were ruined by the rain. I tightened my grip on the bag in my hands. The plastic crinkled loudly. Shen Yanzhou. My voice broke. I'm sorry. You don't need to apologize. He reached out and gently brushed the strands of hair stuck to my forehead from the rain, tucking them behind my ear. You came. His eyes softened. That's enough. The airport announcement sounded again, announcing another departing flight. Around us, the crowd continued moving. People hurried past with their luggage. Some embraced loved ones they had not seen for a long time. Children cried. Adults laughed and complained. But Shen Yanzhou and I stood in the middle of all that noise, looking at each other. Neither of us moved. After a long silence, he finally spoke. Gu Zhaoning. He looked at me with a faint smile. You deducted all my performance bonuses. He paused. Doesn't that mean I worked hard for an entire year for nothing? I froze for a second. Then I laughed. And as I laughed, tears once again slipped down my cheeks. You already resigned. I wiped my tears. How can you still talk about performance bonuses? That's true. He laughed with me. His smile was still gentle and restrained, but his eyes carried a warmth I had not seen in a long time. So now I'm unemployed. He tilted his head slightly. President Gu, would you be willing to buy me a meal? Of course. I wiped the tears from the corner of my eyes. What do you want to eat? Crossing the bridge rice noodles. He picked up my suitcase and turned toward the exit. Kunming's crossing the bridge rice noodles are even better than flour cakes. I followed behind him. Together, we walked through the crowds and left the airport. The rain in Kunming had already stopped. A patch of blue sky appeared above us. Sunlight poured through the gaps between the clouds and fell onto the wet ground, reflecting countless tiny sparks of light. Shen Yanzhou walked ahead of me. His figure looked thinner than before, but his steps were steady. I quickened my pace and walked beside him. Then I reached out and gently held his wrist. His footsteps paused. He lowered his head and looked at my hand holding him. Then he turned his hand around and held my fingers instead. His hand was slightly cold, but it carried a reassuring strength. Gu Zhaoning. Did you come here? He looked at me from the side. Because you want to get back together with me? I looked at his profile. The sunlight outlined his face with a layer of golden warmth. What if I say yes? He was silent for a moment. Then he stopped walking, turned around, and looked directly at me. Then I have a few conditions. What conditions? First, he raised a finger. You can't deduct my performance bonuses anymore. I stared at him. You don't even have a job now. What performance bonuses are you talking about? What if I go back to work? I was stunned. You'd be willing to return? You agree to my conditions first. I smiled. Fine, I agree. Second, he looked at me seriously. From now on, take me with you whenever you go on business trips. No problem. Third, he stopped. His eyes became brighter. Gu Zhaoning, you need to learn how to say thank you. I was slightly surprised. Then I smiled. Thank you. Thank me for what? Thank you. I looked into his eyes. For waiting for me all this time. He looked at me for a long time. Then, slowly, a smile appeared on his face. But this time, it was no longer the faint, restrained smile I had always known. It spread from the corners of his eyes to his lips, from his lips across his entire face. Even his eyes were filled with happiness. You're welcome. He held my hand and continued walking forward. Come on, let's go eat rice noodles. I followed beside him as we walked through the streets of Kunming. The stone roads, freshly washed by the rain, shimmered under the sunlight. Along the roadside, bougainvillea bloomed brilliantly, a sea of vivid red flowers that seemed ready to set the entire spring ablaze. Suddenly, I remembered a sentence. In this life, the thing people fear most is not missing someone. It is missing them and losing the chance to turn back. I had almost lost that chance forever. Fortunately, Shen Yanzhou was still here. He was still waiting for me. No matter how late I arrived, he was still here. The steaming bowl of crossing the bridge rice noodles was placed on the table. A layer of golden oil shimmered across the surface of the soup. Shen Yanzhou helped me transfer the noodles into my bowl, then picked up several slices of meat as thin as paper and dipped them into the hot broth before placing them gently in front of me. Try it. His voice was soft. Kunming's rice noodles are different from the ones back home. I picked up a small portion with my chopsticks, blew on it gently, and placed it into my mouth. The noodles were smooth and tender. The soup was rich and flavorful. The slices of meat were so thin that light could almost pass through them, melting the moment they touched my tongue. How does it taste? It's delicious. Better than the flour cakes? I looked at him. Even better than the flour cakes. A smile appeared on his face. He lowered his head and continued eating his own bowl of noodles. Watching him eat, I suddenly remembered something from many years ago. It was shortly after we got married. Back then, we lived in a small rented apartment. Every day after work, he would come home and cook dinner for me. His specialty was braised pork ribs. Every time he placed the dish on the table, I would pick up a piece, taste it, and casually say, "It's okay." Every single time, he would smile until his eyes curved. Then he would say, "That's good." I had never once told him it was delicious. Not even once. I put down my chopsticks and looked at him. Shen Yanzhou. Your braised pork ribs. I paused. They were really delicious. He slowly raised his head. First, he looked surprised. Then, a smile appeared on his face. That smile carried surprise, happiness, and an emotion I couldn't quite describe. Why are you suddenly bringing that up? Because. I lowered my gaze. Because I never said it before. I picked up another piece of meat, placed it into my mouth, chewed slowly, and swallowed. The things I never said in the past. I looked at him. I want to make up for them one by one now. He stared at me quietly. He didn't say anything, but the light in his eyes grew brighter. Rain began falling outside the window again. Kunming's rain was always like this. It came suddenly. It disappeared quickly. Yet it returned again and again, endlessly continuing. Raindrops tapped lightly against the glass, creating tiny sounds. It was as if someone was playing an unnamed melody. The rice noodle shop was quiet. There were only a few customers left. The owner sat behind the counter dozing off. An old television played an outdated drama in the corner. The volume turned low enough that the dialogue was almost impossible to hear. Everything around us became peaceful. There was only the sound of rain, the quiet clinking of bowls and chopsticks, and the sound of our breathing. Shen Yanzhou put down his chopsticks and looked at me. Gu Zhaoning. He hesitated slightly. What are you going to do about your company? I looked at him. What do you mean? You left. His expression became serious. Who will manage the company now? Xiao Wen is there. I picked up my bowl and took a small sip of soup. It won't cause any major problems. The soup was still hot. The heat made my tongue slightly numb. Besides, I looked at him. No matter how important the company is. I paused. It can never be more important than you. He froze for a moment. Then he smiled. You wouldn't have said that before. That was before. I placed the bowl down. And this is now. I looked directly into his eyes. Shen Yanzhou, I used to think that as long as I made the company stronger, as long as the performance kept improving, I took a breath, then I would have given everyone an answer. To the investors, to the employees, and to you. And now, his voice was quiet. Now I understand. I lowered my eyes. I can face everyone else with a clear conscience. But when it comes to you, my voice softened. I owe you too much. He remained silent for a moment. Then he reached out and gently held my wrist. Gu Zhaoning. His voice was gentle. You don't need to blame yourself. You didn't do anything wrong. He paused, searching for the right words. You were just too busy. That's not an excuse. I interrupted him. Being busy isn't an excuse. Ignoring you isn't an excuse. Being cold isn't an excuse. I looked at him. Shen Yanzhou, you don't need to defend me. I know exactly what I did. He looked at me quietly. There was something complicated in his eyes. Then what do you plan to do now? I met his gaze. I want to win you back. I said each word clearly. No matter whether you agree or not, I will bring you back to my side. He smiled, but there was helplessness in that smile. Pain, and something I couldn't fully understand. Gu Zhaoning, you don't need to chase after me. Why? Because. His fingers slowly moved from my wrist into my palm. He intertwined his fingers with mine. Because I have always been standing right here. I have never gone far. He looked at me. You just never turned around to see me. I lowered my head. My eyes fell on our intertwined hands. Tears filled my eyes once again. One drop after another fell onto the table, onto the edge of the bowl, and into the soup, creating tiny ripples. His fingers were slightly cold, yet he held my hand tightly, as if he was afraid that the moment he loosened his grip, I would disappear. Shen Yanzhou. I turned around. I know. He raised his other hand and gently wiped away my tears. That's why I'm still here. Outside the window, the rain grew heavier. The warm, dim lights inside the rice noodle shop stretched our shadows across the wall. The two shadows overlapped, blending together until they were impossible to separate. At some point, the owner woke up. He glanced at us, then looked outside at the pouring rain. He yawned and leaned back against the counter, falling asleep again. The drama playing on the television finally ended. The ending song began. It was an old song, its melody slow and gentle, drifting through the small shop like a distant memory. Shen Yanzhou and I sat quietly at the table. Neither of us spoke. We simply listened, to the rain, to the song, to each other's breathing. After a long while, he finally spoke. Gu Zhaoning, are you going back tomorrow? No. What about the day after tomorrow? No. He looked at me helplessly. Then when are you planning to go back? I looked at him. When you go back with me. He was stunned for a moment. Then he smiled. What if I don't go back? Then I'll stay in Kunming. I looked straight into his eyes. Wherever you are, that's where I will be. He stared at me for a long time. Then he let out a quiet sigh. Gu Zhaoning, you really are different from before. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? A good thing. He held my hand tightly. So good that I'm still not quite used to it. Then take your time getting used to it. I smiled. After all, I have plenty of time. The rain finally stopped. The sky split open, revealing a deep blue opening above the clouds. A few stars peeked out from between the gaps, glowing faintly in the night. The owner of the rice noodle shop was finally fully awake. He walked over to collect our bowls. He looked at us and asked, "Would you two like some more soup?" Shen Yanzhou shook his head gently. "No, thank you." The owner nodded and carried the bowls away. After taking a few steps, he turned back. His eyes lingered on our hands, still tightly held together. After a moment, he smiled. "Young people, take good care of your life together." With that, he turned around and walked into the kitchen. I was slightly stunned. Then I smiled. Shen Yanzhou smiled as well. "Did you hear that?" The corners of his lips lifted. "Even the owner is telling you to live a good life." I heard him. I stood up and pulled him toward the door. "Come on, let's walk around Kunming." "Right now?" "Yes, right now." We walked out of the rice noodle shop. After the rain, Kunming's air felt as if it had been freshly washed. The bougainvillea along the roadside was soaked with rain. Tiny droplets clung to the petals, sparkling beneath the streetlights. Shin Yanju held my hand as we walked along the damp stone road. Our steps were slow, almost as if he was afraid that if we walked too quickly, this road would reach its end too soon. Gu Zhaoning. He looked at me. Where do you want to go tomorrow? I turned to him. Where have you been these past 4 months? I've been here for 4 months. He smiled faintly. I've already visited most places worth seeing. Then take me to your favorite place. He thought for a moment, then said, Green Lake. Green Lake? Yes. There is a tea house by Green Lake. I go there every afternoon. I order a cup of pu'er tea and watch the ducks on the lake. I can sit there for an entire afternoon. His voice was calm. That was the happiest time I had during these 4 months. I looked at him. A quiet ache rose in my heart. Why Green Lake? He was silent for a moment. Because the first time I came to Kunming to find you, we planned to go to Green Lake, but we never made it there. He paused. So I went alone. It was my way of making up for that regret. I held his hand tighter. Then I whispered, Tomorrow, let's go there together. The corners of his lips lifted. A soft smile appeared. Okay, together. The night grew deeper. The streets became quieter. The number of pedestrians slowly decreased. Under the streetlights, our shadows stretched long across the pavement, as if they wanted to reach the end of the road. Suddenly, I remembered something. Shin Yanzhou. I hesitated before asking, How is your depression now? He was silent for a moment, then slowly replied, Much better. I looked at him suspiciously. Really? He nodded seriously. Really? He turned his head toward me. The streetlight reflected in his eyes, turning his pupils into a warm amber color. Then he spoke softly. Gu Zhaoning. Do you know what the most terrifying thing about depression is? It's not sadness. It's losing the ability to feel anything. Happiness and pain both disappear. It's like being trapped inside a transparent cage. You can see the world outside, but you can never touch it. I unconsciously tightened my grip on his hand. What about now? He lowered his head and looked at our intertwined fingers. Then he said softly, Now, I can feel the warmth from your palm. He looked up at me. His voice was gentle, and it's warm. My eyes became red again, but this time, I held back my tears. I looked at him firmly. Shen Yanzhou, from now on, I'll keep holding your hand. He looked at me with slight surprise. Forever? Forever. A smile appeared on his face. But this smile was different. It no longer carried loneliness. It came from deep within his heart, a smile filled with relief and warmth. All right, I'll be waiting. We continued walking forward. The streetlights turned on one after another, illuminating the entire road beneath the night sky. From somewhere in the distance came the sound of a train whistle, long, low, like a call traveling from far away. Suddenly, Shen Yanzhou stopped. He turned around and looked at me. Gu Zhaoning. Do you still remember what you said to me on the day we got married? I froze for a moment. Then I shook my head. What did I say? He looked at me quietly. His eyes were filled with a soft light. You said, Shin Yanzhou, from now on the two of us will walk a long road together. You can't get lost. The light in his eyes grew brighter. Gu Zhaoning. I never got lost. I looked at him, and finally, my tears fell. But this time, they fell with a smile. I know. I opened my arms and pulled him into my embrace. I know you've always been here. He was stunned for a moment. Then he slowly wrapped his arms around me. His body was thinner than before, but his embrace was incredibly warm. The steady, powerful rhythm of his heartbeat traveled through his chest and reached me. We held each other under the streetlights for a long time, long enough for passing strangers to glance at us, long enough for the distant train whistle to disappear into the night, long enough for a light rain to begin falling from the sky once again. But he didn't let go, and neither did I, because I knew this time I would never let go so easily again. Never. At the tea house beside Green Lake, Shin Yanzhou ordered a pot of pu'er tea. The delicate fragrance of the tea slowly rose into the air, blending with the mist floating above the lake. For a moment, it was impossible to tell whether the scent came from the tea or from the morning mist over the water. I sat across from him, watching his movements as he poured the tea. His fingers were long and steady. The tea flowed from the spout in a graceful arc, landing perfectly into the cups without spilling a single drop. He gently pushed one cup toward me. Try it. His voice was soft. The pour tea here is one of the best. I lifted the cup, gently blew on it, and took a small sip. At first, there was a slight bitterness, but almost immediately, a sweet aftertaste followed. A warmth slowly spread from my throat down into my stomach. I couldn't help but smile. It's really good. He smiled. See? He picked up his own cup and took a sip. Then he turned his gaze toward Green Lake outside the window. On the surface of the water, a group of wild ducks moved together in a neat line, leisurely swimming across the lake. Behind them, tiny ripples spread outward. Sunlight slipped through the gaps between the clouds, painting the surface of the lake with scattered golden reflections. Xin Yanzhou turned back to me. Gu Zhaoning, I've been sitting in this exact place for 4 months. Every afternoon I come here. At first I came alone. Later, the owner of the tea house got to know me. Now, he saves this window seat for me every day. He pointed toward the lake outside. Look, this seat has the best view. You can see the entire lake from here. Following his gaze, I looked outside. The lake stretched endlessly before us. In the distance, Zishan Mountain appeared and disappeared between the clouds and mist. At the foot of the mountain stood rows of white buildings, shining beneath the sunlight. It's beautiful, I whispered. He was silent for a moment. Then he said, but I always felt like something was missing. He turned his face toward me. His eyes met mine. You? What was missing? Was you. I was slightly stunned. Then I smiled. Xin Yanzhou, when did you become so good with words? I've always been like this. He lifted his teacup, perfectly hiding the smile at the corner of his lips. I just never had the right moment to say them before. I looked at him. A feeling I couldn't describe slowly filled my heart. A feeling of finally being at peace. It was like traveling a long, exhausting road. And finally, returning to the home you had dreamed of. You gently opened the door. Inside, there is warm yellow light, a table filled with steaming food, and on the sofa sits the person who has been waiting for you to come home. That feeling was called peace of mind. I lifted my teacup and took another sip. Then I placed it down and looked at him with determination. Xin Yanzhou, we need to have a serious conversation. About what? Our future. He put down his teacup. His expression became serious. He sat up straighter. All right. How do you want to talk about it? Let's talk about the company first. I took a tablet out of my bag, opened a document, and gently pushed it toward him. This is the renewal plan for the North District project. I've already spoken with Zhou Haming. He said that as long as you return, the contract will be signed again under the same terms, and the price will remain unchanged. Shen Yanzhou quickly scanned through the document. Then he looked up and met my eyes. You want me to go back? Not for you to go back. I looked directly at him. I want to invite you back. He froze slightly. Then a smile appeared on his face. Gu Zhaoning, when did you learn to use the word invite? Just now. I smiled as well. And there are many other things I still need to learn. He looked at me silently for a moment. Then he spoke. All right, I'll go back. Really? Of course. He pushed the tablet back toward me. But I have one condition. What condition? I want to be demoted. I stared at him in disbelief. Demoted? Yes. From vice president to project manager. He leaned back in his chair and looked out at Green Lake. Gu Zhaoning, I don't want to be your assistant anymore. I want to become my true self again. What I'm good at is managing projects, not managing people. In the past, I forced myself to handle those responsibilities because you needed me. But now, he turned back and looked at me. Now I want to do what I'm actually good at, not become a tool just because you need one. My heart trembled. A tool. He had actually described himself as a tool. I opened my mouth, wanting to say something, but he raised his hand slightly, stopping me. He wanted to finish what he had to say. Gu Zhaoning, I'm not blaming you. I'm only stating a fact. For these 5 years, you treated me like a part that was always available whenever you needed it. When the company needed me, I went to the company. When the family needed me, I stayed at home. But you never asked me what I truly wanted. I lowered my gaze. Then, what do you truly want? He looked at me. I want equality. His voice was calm, but every word felt like a nail being driven deep into my heart. I want you to see me as a person, someone with my own thoughts, someone with my own needs, someone with my own dignity. not as a tool. I lowered my head and stared at my reflection in the teacup. My face was blurred by the rippling surface of the water, as if it had been broken apart. After a long silence, I slowly raised my head. Okay, I agree. He looked at me. Agree to what? I agree to your demotion. I agree to giving you equality. And I agree. I paused. That from now on, before making any decision, I will ask what you want first. He looked at me quietly for a long time. Then, finally, a smile appeared on his face. He looked at me quietly for a long time. Then, he smiled.